Actually, I told somebody one time you can actually do art with just about any medium, anything. And I had a challenge one day with a guy. I had a cup of Tim Hortons coffee, and I never had any cream in it or anything, so I decided to do a quick sketch, a little landscape with the coffee. So what I did first is I made a value scale, right? As dark as it can go and as light as it can go by watering it down. And when I finished, it looked like a little sepia painting. It looked like an old photo.
Hi, I'm Laura Coltis, your host for Arts Delight. That was Allan Gillard, this week's guest. There's a standing joke in Torsko, where he now lives, that Allan won't play the guitar until he builds it first. Allan also designs and crafts interiors for heritage homes. He builds unique staircases for both old and new homes, paints impressive and expressive oil paintings that are often in demand, and creates incredibly detailed wood-burning images which he has sold all across the country. When we return, we'll have a chat with primitive artist Allan Gillard. You won't want to miss it.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Welcome back to the show. Our interview of Allan Gillard begins by asking him how he defines himself.
Well, I'm actually what I would call a primitive artist, not formally trained. My first creative thing I ever did was to draw. I could draw before I could probably write or print. And probably the first creative thing I ever did. So it stuck with me for most of my life. Art was probably my biggest passion. But yeah, and woodwork came later. It never came until I was probably in my early 20s.
What's your earliest recollection of, like I presume it was somewhere at school that you got a sense that at least you could draw?
Oh, for art, it was at an early age, probably in grade 1. I mean, I started drawing in classrooms and got told off a few times by the teachers and knuckles cracked, and I'm sure there's people who probably see this program will remember me in their class or whatever, sketching or drawing in the back of a book and got a clip on the knuckles for it. But then I had other teachers that pushed me to keep drawing, but they'd give me projects after school to feed my passion as an artist. So during classes then I probably didn't draw, so after school I would probably do something for the school. It could be a baseball game or a play or something. They'd get me to do the drawings, or Christmas they'd get me to do the chalkboards in the school or something.
I remember you were telling me a story about instead of having a lemonade stand on the side of the road, you used to paint rocks and sell them.
I did. I used to have a toolbox, have some drawers into it. Actually, my father's old toolbox, I believe it was. And I'd pick up little flat rocks and I'd paint little scenes on it and sketch stuff on it, like it could be cartoon figures, could be anything. Little scenes and stuff, and I'd sell them to tourists coming along the highway, just down from our house. And I did pretty good, for a kid. You needed that extra bit of money. That was great.
Yes, and yes, a good way to make money too.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It did better than the worms. I sold worms too, but the worms didn't go as good as the, right?
Yeah. So I mean, so how did all of that beginning of art and sense of art kind of evolve into woodworking?
Woodworking came later. Actually, a fellow named George Cammy, I decided one time I needed a bit of space to have for a little art studio. And he had a small...
And where was this to?
This was in Corner Brook.
Yeah.
In the valley, what they call the valley in Corner Brook. And I went to see him. I never knew him before that. I knew he was a woodworker. But I had no intentions of doing woodwork. So I asked him if he would rent the little section on the side to me for a little art studio where I can go on my private time and do my painting. and he agreed that he'd rent it to me. So after, I don't know, a month or two being in the studio, he got overwhelmed with a bit of work. And he came out and asked me if I would be interested in doing a bit of work for him. He oversee it and coached me through it. And I said I wasn't interested because I never did woodwork before. So I'd prefer not to. And he said, well, he said, I'll tell you what, this is not a complicated job, but he said, if you take it on, I'll coach you through it. He said, did you ever do woodwork? And I said, never. So I agreed I'd take it on, and he coached me through it, and then he let me alone. Probably 75% of it was done. He let me finish it. And I finished it off, and the customer picked it up, and he said the customer loved it, thought it was a really good job. So he said, would you be interested in doing some more work? He said, no, I'll coach you through it. And he said, if you do, he said, you can use my shop and I'll pass your name around to people, he said, and get your name going. He said, if it's a way that you can make a few dollars, and he said, I wouldn't mind doing that. He said, if you stay at woodwork, you can use my shop anytime. I'll teach you.
What did you make of that? I mean, like,
well, this guy was a master woodworker. I mean, he made everything from a violin, like actually there's a violin in the Driftwood band. Bugs Green actually plays the violin. It's a blue violin. Mm-hmm. And the violin that he plays, the fella that taught me woodwork, George Cammy, made it. Mm-hmm. You know, so he very skillful. And the stair building, he was probably one of the best, I'd say, in the Maritimes. He designed and built beautiful big staircases. And he decided, and I never did none of that now, but I stayed at it, and after a while he decided that he'd give me a little more challenging project. Mm-hmm. So he came to me one day and said, well, I have a staircase, a little staircase I wouldn't mind you doing for a customer. He said, would you mind doing that? And I said, well, I don't know anything about stairs. He said, well, you'll figure it out as you go. You just, Monday morning, he said, there's a lady and her husband wants a little staircase made. Good one, he said, to practice on, you know. And so he said, so you got to go down. He said, I told him you're coming. So I arrived at the door. And when I was probably 19 or 20 years old, I mean, I looked like a kid around 15. I wasn't a very big fella or nothing, 125 pounds maybe, and, you know. But anyway, I arrived at the door, and I remember the guy answering the door and asking who I was. And I said, well, I'm Al Gillard. I said, I was sent over by George Cammy to do your stairs. And they said, I don't think so. They said, how old are you? And I said, well, I told them, I said, I'm 20. I said, I'm 20 years old or whatever, or 20 or 21. He said, well, hang on for a minute. So I left standing at the door while he picked up the phone and phoned George Cammy. And he said to George, there's a fella at my door that claims that you sent him over here to do my stairs. He said, is that right? And George said, well, he said, he can do it. He said, are you sure? He don't look like he knows very much. He said, he don't look very old, right? Or very knowledgeable for that stuff. And George said, oh, he could do it. So I went in, I measured, George told me to measure the space it had to go in, rise and run or whatever. I didn't understand what it meant, rise or run. I just took the measurements like he told me. Went back to the shop, and George explained what I had to do. Mm-hmm. Did the job, quite impressed with that I actually figured it out. Mm-hmm. And then I got hooked. Then I was all of a sudden I thought I was a woodworker. Mm-hmm. Right? Thought I was really good at it, right?
Seems like
the bee's knees. I thought, well, now I can do stairs. I only take 3 or 4 steps, but to me it was something I never done, and I was kind of proud of it. Mm-hmm. So and then from there on, I just kept at the woodwork, and decided one year to take my art, go to Halifax and see if I can get my art into a gallery in Halifax.
Allan, to this day, is hooked on woodwork. He builds exquisite staircases, but as you'll find out later, he creates exquisite artwork.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Another activity that Allan is good at is storytelling. Here he combines a good story, discovery of the Western Canadian lifestyle, and wood-burning art.
Several years later, I decided I'm going to go to Alberta, right? So went to Alberta, ended up working for a company up there. Then I went out around and started studying the rodeo circuit. Enjoyed the chuck wagon races and
What is the
anything.
difference between Newfoundland and...
Oh, it's totally different. Totally different. I actually had a craving for water. There was no water. Like there was little ponds or something, and you never had the ocean. So I actually craved seeing the ocean when I went there, and then I got used to it. And we used to go out to Dunvegan, it was, and there was a river and some nice places out by a lake or whatever, and I enjoyed it. So I got comfortable up there, and I started going to the rodeo circuit and chuck wagon races and everything. And then I decided I'm going to start doing some art and work on a series of pieces called of Western art. And one in particular, the first one I took on doing was a plowing match.
The what?
A plowing match is a competition.
Yeah.
Competition where you get the guys who have their horses, work horses, at this competition, so you can pull the heaviest amount of, right? It's a big thing up there. It's as important as a chuck wagon race so I decided I was right impressed with the horses and the size of them and how strong and the people too. And I decided, well, I'm going to do a piece now called the plowing match. So I said, I got to find a person that I can use. I needed a lot of subject matter, a lot of like an inventory of people that I could use, and I needed shots of horses, and so I decided to go to the Wannon plowing match and see if I can find some stuff. And I was taking shots of people, like older people, interesting characters, and they didn't know I was, but I had a telephoto lens, and I seen this guy in particular in a crowd, and he was leaned back filling his pipe with tobacco, and he was laughing. He was laughing. It was really hearty, and he had the old wrinkled up old cowboy hat on, and the shirt, and his old tobacco pouch shoved in it. And I thought, now this is the guy. This is the guy that I want to use in my piece of work. I think this guy looks the part. Now, he was up in a crowd of people. I never met him, didn't know who he was. And then I decided, okay, now I'm going to go down and I'm going to take, when they had their break, I'd go down and see some of the guys who had the horses and get some shots of different teams of horses that I can use in this piece I was going to create. And I went down and I took shots of all the different teams of horses, right? So now I had enough subject matter inventory to create this piece, see? And I went home to the studio, and I had, out of all the pictures I had there, I kept going back to this old guy. I said, I really like this guy. This guy looks the part. So I decided, okay, I sketched him on the board and start working at it. Now I said I need a team of horses. So I went through all the pictures of horses, going through different ones, and I come across this team of horses, close up I had. And I said, now that's the ones I think will look good. So I sketched them on here, put it all together, and brought it in perspective. And when I finished it, to jump ahead, we had an art show the next year in Wanton when they had the plowing match again. So I figured I'd go and have an art show there, just show some of my work. I went there, set up inside the building, and lo and behold, people loved it. Loved the ones that I did in wood, all burnt, the Western stuff, theme, you know. So this lady came over to me and said, who's this? They said, this is Lloyd Finch, isn't it? And I said, I don't know. I said, I never met the guy. She said, well, you did a picture there, it's called The Plowing Match. You didn't meet the guy. And I said, no, I didn't. I said, I never met him before. I said, who is he? And they were dumbfounded that I didn't know who this guy was. And I said, well, I don't know him. I said, he's an important guy. They said, he's one of the most important fellows of all here in the plowing match. He's the world champion. I picked him out of a crowd of people. He was retired. So here he was. I was creating a piece called the plowing match. He was the actual world champion plowing match guy. So the chance of that happening is pretty slim. But that's part of the story. So then they said, is that his horses? And I said, I don't know. I just picked a set of horses down in the...
Sounds kind of dicey.
Yes, down in the crowd of the guys there. I said, found a team of horses. I said, and I put them with him. Well, they said, if it's not his horses, it's like doing a portrait of a guy and putting some other man's wife with him, because their horses are like family, right? You can't take a team of horses and put it with some other plowing match guy, right? You don't do that. So I was starting to sweat in and thinking, oh, this is a disaster. Being totally ignorant to the fact that I didn't know enough about, the plowing match itself, right? Just as a spectator. So they said, well, we're going to call him. So they, over the PA system, called Lloyd Finch and said, you got to come to the stadium and see this piece of work that this guy had done of you, portrait. So in he comes, and we're all sitting around. There's hundreds of people there, and I'm wondering, oh my, if this is not his horses, I'm going to be some disappointed and look like a fool. So in he came, and you can hear a pin drop, and he started walking up through, and here's this big piece I had done of him, almost life size. He walked up through the tables, went right up to the piece, and he started sizing it up, and he got down low and looking at it and looking at his portrait, and he looked like he was impressed with that. And then he started looking at his horses, so I'm figuring now, here's where the problem's going to start, right? So I said, this is going to be a problem. There's no way that that's his horses. So he gets up, big strapping man, big guy, and character, like one of these characters, he's the real deal. So he walked over to me and he said, are you the guy that did my portrait? And I said, yes, I'm the guy that done your portrait, yeah. He said, you done a great job. He shook my hand, and I'm like, okay, that's wonderful.
Passed the test.
Now, he said, I got to tell you, you also done a wonderful job on my horses. I picked his young fella. Two young fellas were using his horses down in the competition. He was up in the audience, so I never connected the two. Only when I home put it in the studio and brought it out I happened to pick him, the former owner of the horses. His sons was using, and put the two of them together.
I'd say you're a lucky man.
What's that?
I'd say you're a lucky man.
That was the flukiest thing ever, and they wrote it up in a few magazines, the story, because it was just so fluky. It was unbelievable.
A great story and a great example of his wood-burning skill. We'll be right back.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
We continue our show with the multi-talented Allan Gillard of Torsco.
Well, we're jumping really a long ways ahead. I've been 43 years now as a woodworker. Yeah. So I've kind of got a reputation for woodwork and designing, and so a fella here in the community, Torsco, asked Bobby O'Keefe actually, approached me one day and come to my studio, and he seen that I did heritage style woodwork. So they wanted to know if I would come down and have a look at this huge stained glass window, and would I design something to put display this window in. So I said, well, I don't have a problem with that. And so I suggested maybe we should build a little chapel, maybe something that'll look like a little church to display the window in. And then we decided, well, we could put the statues and the artifacts in it also. So it ended up becoming designing a building instead of just a display. So by doing the building, I actually, I accomplished two things: getting to know the people and fitting in, So I ended up at the end of the year having the building done, completed, and they filled it up with their artifacts and everything, and it came out absolutely beautiful.
You like working with heritage homes and that kind of stuff, and I remember you telling me about the spiral staircase you did at some home up in Shea
Yes, the
Heights,
winding staircase.
I did what's so unusual about that one? Because
well, this staircase in particular, I actually designed it and then built it. I wanted to build something really unique, something that looked like something you would built years ago, because heritage woodwork is mostly what I do, right? I stuck to the old traditional style of woodwork as well. Like, I still use power tools and stuff, but I still do the old style woodwork. I try to keep in the tradition of the old woodworkers and try to do quality work, but anyhow, I designed this staircase and in Shea Heights for this big home up there, and took 10 months to build it, and it become a job that I was quite proud of when I had it finished, and quite unique because it's freestanding. It doesn't touch the wall.
So, Allan, you're an artist, you're a woodworker, and you live here in Tourist Cove. You got any plans for the future?
Yes, I'm hoping to semi-retire now in another year or so, and I'm opening a studio and a gallery, and a shop. I do a bit of sculpture, and I paint, and on the weekends, probably on Sundays, we're going to be open to the public.
Allan plans to open his studio this summer in Tourist Cove. Make it a destination for yourself, friends, and family members. See you next week.